Hello and welcome back to Tim Rohde Rides Motorbikes. I'm Tim, and the bikes what I've mostly been riding this week is the all-new Triumph Tiger 1200. It's Triumph's new big capacity adventure bike, and Triumph has come very, very close to making one of the best big capacity adventure bikes you can buy in 2022, but like my BMI, it's not perfect. So let's find out why. Yes, this is the £19,100 Tiger 1200, and that does sound expensive because this is the very top spec one that Triumph has lent me. It's the Rally Explorer. Rally is the off-road family of the new Tiger 1200, and Explorer means it's got a 30-litre tank, and it comes with basically everything as standard. The actual Tiger 1200 range starts at £14,600, and there's a road-based GT range as opposed to Rally, and that gets a 19-inch front wheel with cast wheels. It's more road biased. This has obviously got a 21-inch front wheel, spoked wheels, and more suspension travel. So the idea is that you can take this to the Sahara Desert and rip around. Are you going to do that? Probably not. Now, let's talk about the chassis first. It's got 240 kilogram weight, wet weight. That is for the entry-level Tiger. This is the heaviest one. It's 261 kilos. Triumph says it's up to 25 kilos lighter than the old one, but believe you me, this here in front of us is a really heavy bike, and it is still top heavy, and it does feel a bit ungainly, and I've felt a bit wary doing U-turns. I've put the seat height down to its lowest, which I think is 850. No, it's 875 mil on this, and it goes up to 895 mil, which is basically 35 inches. It's really, really tall. If you get the regular one, that's got a seat height of 850, so it's a bit more approachable. And Triumph's done a lot to the ergos of this bike. They said they've made it narrower between your legs to make it easier to get your leg over and get your feet down. Still feels flipping wide to me, this seat. I've just had my friend ride it, or sit on it rather, and he also agreed it feels very wide between your legs. So it is actually quite an intimidating bike, all told, for high centre of gravity, and it still feels quite heavy. Obviously, like every motorbike, as soon as you're doing 1 mile an hour, you don't really notice the weight. But anyway, let's talk about the frame a bit, because that's 5.4 kilos lighter than on the old one. And the subframe is a bolt-on one, so you adventure people who like to drop your bikes and bend your frames, you'll be able to replace that if you bend it. This tri-link swing arm, that sounds weird, it's 1.5 kilos lighter, and it's a kind of slightly weird spindly tubular thing, but I quite like it. And obviously this bike is shaft drive as well, which is great if you're lazy like me. Now, you get Showa semi-active suspension on all of these. Actually looks a little bit cheap. Don't know. Doesn't look as cool as the stuff on my KTM, but it doesn't really matter, does it? You get 200mm fork travel on the GT and 220mm fork travel on the Rally ones. It adapts preload automatically based on your load and how fat you are, so very for me. And you can adjust it between 9 presets of comfortness. The handlebars are a bit wider than on the previous one. They're 20mm wider. Triumph says they've done that for improved control off-road, and if you've seen the launch of this, they're pretty serious about this being a competent off-road bike. I've not done any more off-road than this, to be fair. All models get these moulded hand guards as standard, and Rally models get an aluminium sump guard. Now, as I said, this is the top spec Rally Explorer, so this gets these crash bars as standard as well. It also gets heated seats as standard, front and back, and heated grips as standard. So if you're 19 grand, you get a lot of kit. Obviously, if you go for the cheaper ones, you don't get all that cool stuff. We can't not talk about the engine. The heart of this is obviously a big deal, because it's very different to what we've had before. It's an 1160cc triple, and it's got the T-plane cranks. That's the uneven firing order that we've had on the Tiger 900 for a little bit. And it does not sound like a whiny triple. I love a whiny triple. It doesn't sound like one. It sounds like a mix of a twin lowdown and a V4 higher up. And in terms of power, you're looking at 150 horsepower, which is a 9 horsepower increase over the old one. And that's at 9,000 RPM. Torque is up 8 Newton meters to 130. At 7,000 RPM. So there's a massive increase in power and a massive reduction in weight. So this is one properly fast motorbike, as we'll find out when we get out onto the riding bit. So you've got a slimmer exhaust than before to keep the panniers tight to the body. You've got up and down blipper as standard. Yeah, There is a problem with the engine on this, which we will get to. It is very vibey. In terms of tech, you get a 7-inch screen, which is all low reflection, it's optically bonded, etc, etc. It looks quite nice. However, I still don't like the way Triumph forces you to use this little fiddly cube cursor thing to control it. It's just a bit too close to the indicators when you've got gloves on for me. And when you do switch to other screens, it squishes that nice round tacho into a, I don't know, a red Easter egg. But anyway, the menus are actually reasonably easy to use. You can adjust all your settings here, your maps, your traction control, your rider modes. Your damping, you can set between 9 levels. I think it's 9, I can't be bothered to count. Someone do that for me, leave me a comment calling me numerically illiterate, as HSBC keep doing. But anyway, that's all the menu stuff. You'll get about 250-300 miles on a tank from this with the 30-litre tank, because I've been getting about 46-50 mpg on a run. But anyway, let's take it for a ride and see why I think it is so good to ride. Yeah, it's Tiger time. Here we see the Triumph Tiger 1200 Rally Explorer in its natural habitat. A slightly gravelly National Trust car park, to be honest. Yeah, slight scene change. I came out and filmed the riding bit earlier, straight after doing the walk around, and filmed a nice 2-minute time lapse. So you couldn't hear me. But anyway, first thing you notice when you get on this bike is it's a bit top heavy. You don't want it to get too far off centre. I'm 6'3", I've got the seat on its lowest height. And yeah, it's a little bit intimidating. The tank is nearly empty at the moment, which does help. When it's full, it is, yeah, heavy. And a little bit ungainly, and it just feels, you know, once you're doing 1 mile an hour, you can get your feet up, and it's fine. But when you come to a stop on this bike, it does feel a little bit like you're trying to balance a bowling ball on an erect nipple. Well, it's not quite that bad, but you know, we've all been there, haven't we? So yeah, it just feels a little bit ungainly. Balance is actually good once you're moving at slow speed, but it's just a pretty intimidating bike. Obviously there are lower seat height versions, and the GT version with smaller wheel, lower suspension, less travel is going to be better, but I've not ridden one of those, so I can't talk about it. What I can talk about it's the noise this bike makes. It makes a phenomenal noise. It really surprised me when I first rode this. I've said it about 15 times in this video already. It sounds a bit like a V4 from the airbox. You don't get the exhaust noise, but you get a lot of airbox noise, and it's delicious. It's one of the best sounding adventure bike engines out there. Probably the best sounding one. It might actually even sound better than the Multistrada V4. But anyway, let's quickly talk about ergos. It's really relaxed. The seat is nice and squishy and comfy and heated, and I've got physical buttons for the heated seat and heated grips. I don't have to go into menus to activate them like on my KTM. And it's just a very easy-going bike to ride. It's unintimidating. It sounds a bit gravelly at low RPM, but it's got thrust everywhere at pretty much any revs in any gears. If it wasn't already a brand of joysticks, I'd recommend that Triumph called this engine the Thrustmaster, because that's what it does. But anyway, yeah, the mirrors are good up to a point, which I'm about to talk about when we get into dual carriageway. The mirrors are very easy to adjust. They're super sturdy, but there you go. I'm doing about 5,500 RPM now, and they're starting to blur. And that's when you get into top gear. And you start tanking on a bit, doing like 80, 85, which also you shouldn't do on a British motorway, but if you do, the mirrors are blurry at 80, and the bars start tingling and vibing, and it's all really down to that T-plane engine. If you pull the clutch in, they clear up, and it's just a bit naff. It's something you think Triumph should probably have ironed out in the development of this bike, but otherwise, it's lovely. I mean, apart from the little cursor toggle thing, which, as I've said, is a bit too fiddly for my thumb, the dash is clear and easy to read. The screen is marvellous. Look, when it's down, loads of wind. When it's up, it actually clears my helmet. And I'm 6'3", and I've not ridden an adventure bike that has such a little bubble of air. It'd be absolutely perfect, maybe with a little flippy up thing on top, but it almost doesn't need it. It's a delightful bike, and it's a relaxed riding position. It is quite wide between your legs though, especially when you put your feet down. I'm not the only person that's commented on this. My mate sat on it, as I've said, and he said, oh yeah, that feels wide between your thighs, and it does, and Triumph says they've made it narrower. I never really rode the old 1200, so I can't comment, but this does feels hefty, feels substantial. It doesn't disappear. Almost, my KTM does sort of disappear when you're on it. But anyway, that's pretty boring to talk about. Let's go from a 50 limit up to a 70 dual carriageway, and yeah,
we'll talk a bit more about some of the practical things. This bike, the blipper, is lovely going down into third, do a little shoulder check, wang it down here, third gear, 40 to 70. Front wheel hopped up in third gear off a little crest there. Usually the electronics do a really good job of keeping the front wheel planted, and I'm in sport mode, and I've only really ridden this bike in sport mode because I like a sharp throttle response. The good thing is that you can separate your suspension hardness from the sportiness, so you can have sporty throttle response with soft suspension and it stays like that. It's nice, you can just set it up very easily how you want. I've got a mode button here for changing riding modes. Haven't really touched it, to be honest. Now I'm doing 70, you can hear a bit more wind, and yet the mirrors are blurry at 73, which is about 4,800 RPM. And yeah, as I said, if you sit at 85, it's a blurry mess, and then your hands start getting a bit tingly. And I'm not someone that normally notices bar vibes. I've ridden the S1000 XR, the BMW 4-cylinder that everyone whinged about, and I never noticed that being vibey, but this, after a long journey, I can really feel it now at 75 miles an hour. It's going to leave you with tingly fingers, which is sometimes good when you wake up in the morning, but not what you want on a motorbike. Anyway, practical things. I've been getting 46 mpg out of this, pretty much riding it like a knob, so you will get better on long runs. That means you get 250 to 300 miles out of this 30-litre tank, and look at it. It's massive, and it's all carried up high, which is, I think, why it feels a bit top heavy. But that's boring. I'm going to get some twisty roads and show you the handling, because despite having a 21-inch front wheel, this thing bloody boogies. Oh, I suppose I can talk about the brakes now, can't I? Yeah, Brembo Stylemas. They don't have the initial bite that you might expect from the sports bike alignment of these calipers, if we're talking marketing terms. But they certainly get the job done. They slow you down well when you haul on the lever, and they encourage you to explore that 150 horsepower. It's fun to explore that horsepower. The other thing is, to get that noise, you end up riding this in second and third gears everywhere, which does harm the economy a little bit. But you know, I'm a child, I give in to these temptations. If you're a grown-up, you'll probably be reserved and have an IAM badge on your fridge. Anyway, let's get some twisties and talk about le handling, as they say in France. One thing I haven't really spoken about so far is the ride, the comfort of the suspension. And that's really because I've not noticed it for bad. It's good, it's really good. I've had it in comfort mode, and you can make it go more comfortable in comfort mode almost in the manual settings. And it is pillowy and really does iron out bumps really well without losing any sense of kind of control. When I put my KTM into the really comfortable suspension mode, it feels a bit wallowy and boat-like. And this also goes pretty stiff in sport mode. I've just left it in sport mode with the suspension set to normal, and I've left it there. And it's great having all these options, isn't it? But I don't know, I kind of just leave them once I've found the setting I like, and leave it. I don't go back and reconfigure it. I'll just leave it in sport mode, and it does everything I need it to, which is good. There is a little flaw in this bike's drivetrain as well, in the fueling in second gear out of tight corners can be a bit snatchy. I'm struggling to do it now, but off camera across junctions in second gear is a little bit grabby. So it's not perfect at low speeds, but generally speaking it's alright. Anyway, let's go from slow to fast, and you feel the bars go light, and you feel it wants a wheelie, but it's not letting you, but it's smoothly cutting in, and you just see the traction control light, can't speak, flickering on the dash. It just makes such a good noise. And if you want an idea of the performance of this, go and watch my first impressions video, because I did a lot more giggling in that. You get to a corner on Twisty Road and it just tips in so nicely. You've got these big wide bars, 20 mil wider than before, and it just flicks from side to side better than you would think. I think this tips in faster than my KTM with a 19-inch front wheel, and this has got a 21, and it actually feels probably more stable as well. It just kind of lets you flow through a corner. You don't feel the electronic suspension getting up to any mischief. I would be having more fun on the KTM down here, because every crest is just a wheelie thing, and obviously on the KTM you can turn the wheelie control down a bit, but you still got traction control on. This you have to turn everything off. But yeah, as a road bike, you really don't need to worry about being able to keep up with your sports bike owning mates, because this thing goes down corners beautifully. You don't really feel the tyres doing anything weird despite being semi-knobbly. It is really good fun. It's just fast. Thrustmaster a go-go. So anyway, yeah, in short, the riding experience of this is brilliant. It's really good fun on a B road. You want to thrash it, you want to rev that engine to its 9,500 RPM redline because it sounds phenomenal, and it's enough to make me just turn around and do that road again rather than taking the quicker way back. And I think that's a good thing. It's just a shame it's a bit uncouth at motorway speeds when you just want to get somewhere. It's a little bit tingly, a little bit vibey, and you think Triumph should have sorted that out. And apparently those vibes, I know a few journalists who went on the international launch picked up on those, and they picked up on them on the GT models as well. So it's not a tyre thing, it is the engine, and I think the fact it clears up when you pull the clutch in proves that. But you know, what do I know? Go and try it out, they might not annoy you. The rest of the riding experience is pretty blooming amazing, to be honest. I'd prefer riding this quickly to a speed triple, as that probably says more about me being a boring old man. I don't know, but anyway, enough waffle. Back to you, Tim, for an outro. If the GoPros have worked this time and not done a 4K night lapse, time lapse of my anus.
So what do I think of the Triumph Tiger 1200? It's a real turn up for the books. Triumph has absolutely knocked it out the park with this bike in terms of the engine, the excitement, and how feisty it feels. It feels properly leery, which I didn't expect for a Triumph. Now, the niggles. At 70 miles an hour, you've got reasonably noticeable handlebar vibes. The mirrors get a bit blurry at 70 as well, which just is a bit uncouth, and I think that will annoy some people. Personally, I could live with it because that engine is so exciting. It sounds like a V4, certain parts of the revs, and it's got loads of grunt, blah, blah, blah. Now, the other niggles, yeah, I kind of wish Triumph would let you back the electronics off a little bit, and it also still feels very cumbersome and top heavy, which is just a bit of a shame given that Triumph made such a big deal about the weight loss this bike has had. Yeah, my KTM feels a lot more just manageable, I guess, and a lot of that is to do with how wide the seat is on this. So yeah, do go and test ride one before sticking your money down, because you might not necessarily like how heavy it is, but otherwise it's a wicked bike. It's really high tech. I do wish it had radar cruise control. However, that screen is one of the best screens I've ever used on a motorbike for someone who's 6'3", so well done Triumph. The luggage feels solid. It's got foam in the top box. Little practical touches like that have been thought through. 19 grand's a hell of a lot of money, but so's a GS Adventure once you've stuck stuff on it. And obviously there is a new GS 1300 coming out soon, so you might want to wait for that before parting with your cash. But anyway, hopefully that was helpful. Thank you for watching. Please like this video if it was. Also subscribe to the channel because there's plenty more motorbike videos coming soon. Might not have a cameraman for them though, so lucky you for this one. Thank you and goodbye.